This is something to talk about from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we get together and discuss a variety of topics, and we're glad to have you here today. Our program is sponsored by Fieldstone Memory Care of Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone is offering innovative and compassionate care worth the wait. Call 360-271-2530 to schedule a tour of Fieldstone's beautifully appointed apartments. They're on Rolling Bay, 360-271-2530. And Ann Lovejoy is here and will introduce today's program.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for showing up on this glorious drizzly day. Personally, I'm quite pleased to have the drizzle. Our guest speaker today is Chasity Malatesta, a woman of many skills and talents, and she's very generously offered to help us out with bystander training today. Chasity, please introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Chasity Malatesta, and I go by she and her and mom. So if you accidentally say mom at any time, I will respond to you. The land that we are on belongs to the Squamish territory and the indigenous excellence and leaders in on the area where I live and pay rent on Bainbridge Island. And I've been on Bainbridge Island for 6 years. I have 3 sons, 2 7-year-olds and a 10-year-old. I taught secondary science and STEM for 20 years in high school and teach ed courses in secondary institutions. Because of the low number of African-American females in the Pacific Northwest, my other roles that I have had the opportunity to step into were cultural ambassador, the cultural kids curator of a sort, culture club, Black student union, brown student union, anybody that wasn't white student union. And it afforded me an opportunity, because I bred later on, to walk into some arenas to learn how to decolonize and understand my own positionality of power as an African-American and multicultural female here in the Pacific Northwest. My intro into bystander training was in secondary. Most secondary teachers will take a form of bystander training to mitigate harm on students, not just cultural students and LGBTQ+, but typically because oftentimes issues arise in secondary institutions. And so we do have a standard of care of mitigating harm. Today, I'm so excited that all of you are here, and I'm going to tell you why in a moment. Some of you love to listen, and so if you have your cup of tea, if you need to go potty, I'm going to normalize everything on screen. If you want to pet your dog, if you need to do your hair, have a bit of food. If it's really tasty, I might ask you for the recipe, but there's nothing you can do on screen that would take away from what I'm going to share with you today. You're going to share with me a little bit about the culture of the island that I live on, because you have more lived experience than I do, and I value that, and I need to hear from you. This training has 5 D words in it only, 5 D words. I do not care which D word you take away from this, but all of you at the end of this training will be trained to be bystanders, meaning you can take a particular action, a particular D word that we taught, and practice it even now as we begin the training. And the D words really simply are distract, delay, document, and direct. And I'll go into each one of those later. My goals are you to know those 5 D words: distract, delay, delegate, document, and direct. You're going to see them and hear them, but I just want to say them in the very beginning. So if you take a break to go eat your nibble, you'll remember to come back and find a D word. Anne, would you do me a favor and be thinking during the presentation about LGBTQ+ people? Katie, during the presentation, will you do me a favor and will you begin thinking about BIPOC in case I miss anything? Reed, during the presentation, since you have such an important job, I'm going to borrow Megan, if that's okay. Megan, give me a thumbs up. Megan, I want you to think about an elder generation. The reason why I'm appointing 3 people is because I work with community, meaning that we work in community and we learn in community, and I could miss something. So I don't want to be the albeit information provider. The resources that I'm sharing today will be given to you, and I expect you to use, alter, steal, share any way you want. But I need reflections of your experience to make sure that I have a full visual of our culture as we're going into this training, because all of this today is about our community on Bainbridge Island. So Reed, are you giving me my share? Do I get to share now? And welcome for those people coming in. We're normalizing all kinds of movement. So if you're used to sitting still and watching and staring and your butt gets sore, please move it in any variety of positions. If you start dancing, I might join you. So do be careful. Kimmy, I knew it was going to be you. So if you do start dancing, just I might need to hear the music as you're playing. Okay. Are you guys seeing my screen yet?
No.
No? I better hit the button then, huh?
Yeah, there we go.
I should probably hit the button. That's always nice. Okay, you're beginning to see a start of a presentation. All right, welcome to Bystander Training. I don't assume that you understand what the word bystander means, so I'm going to pick on Anne. Anne, what does bystander, the word bystander mean?
Traditionally, it means somebody who is standing by, who is maybe not directly involved in an action or an activity or an event, but someone who is peripheral to it, but who is present physically and noticing.
Correct.
Does that work?
And that is an absolute perfect. We're all bystanders, and whether we like it or not, we contribute to the largest mass of people that are usually around for violent or oppressive acts. So believe it or not, on the ferry when things have happened, even if you were a rider, you were a bystander. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine if everyone was trained in techniques to be able to mitigate harm, we're the largest group. The victims and the perpetuators of harm are in such a small, minute group that if we just made bystanders aware, we could mitigate harm. I'm going to show you a small clip. Some of you received this from Reed already, but I'm going to show you a little bit for bystander. We're going to begin to talk about race because my positionality of power is an African-American facilitator. Someone else may start it and they may represent the LGBTQ or Asian American or Muslim. I want you to be aware that I need you to see color in this particular case because my positions or my lived experiences on things will be informed by my Blackness. And I like my Blackness. So we're going to begin with the first portion of
The United States has a long history of violence against people of color, disabled people, Muslims, immigrants, and LGBTQ people. In our current political moment, white supremacists and white nationalists have been emboldened. And as a result, public attacks are on the rise. Many people aren't sure what to do if they witness a racist or transphobic attack. Here are some ideas. It might be tempting to look away out of fear or because you aren't sure of what to do. But not getting involved communicates approval and leaves the victim high and dry. If you can, talk with the victim. This is about supporting them. Look them in the eye, check in with them. Try not to escalate or provoke the perpetrator. Simply sitting or standing next to someone is better than nothing at all. It's difficult to witness any kind of violence, so try to breathe and stay present. Many assume others will document an incident going on. If it's safe to do so and the victim doesn't object, film or record an incident. This helps to keep track of the rise of incidents like this, and it also ensures that the victim's versions of events can be confirmed. Check in with the victim. Ask them what they need. Get their consent and offer concrete ways to support them. Get them water. Help them get composed. Help them call a friend or even get to a safer place. Armed police presence often escalates rather than reduces the risk of violence in a situation. Because police have been trained to see people of color, gender nonconforming folks and Muslims as criminals, they often treat victims as perpetrators of violence. So if the victim hasn't asked you to call the police, do not, I repeat, do not call the police. The culture of white supremacy and anti-Blackness is perpetuated by our media, political systems, and social media. You can contribute to making these attitudes unacceptable by challenging white supremacy, even when you're not in a crisis. If you're white yourself, talk to your white family and friends about anti-Blackness and white supremacy. Do it every day, especially when you're in an all-white space. By doing this, you confront the culture without putting anyone else in danger of an immediate backlash. Now is the time for all of us who believe in justice to come together. It doesn't have to look one way. You can canvass, you can phone bank, you can write letters, or you can even create art for the movement. Taking it to the streets is always nice. But if you don't have time for that, you could always support the marginalized populations who are on the front lines of this work financially. White supremacy and anti-Blackness affects all of us, and fighting against it affirms all of our humanity.
A bystander, just as Anne said, is any person who witnesses an act of violence. Hard stop. There is an active bystander, or as our children on Bainbridge at the Bainbridge Island School District have learned, the word upstander. That's a person who witnesses and intervenes. What in this way, I'm going to stop sharing for just 1 minute here. And I'm going to ask if you feel brave enough to share, and if you don't, please do not, I will not be offended if you're like, no. And you can give me a hand signal that says not today or okay. Those two work really well with me. I will not be offended. But what kind of things get in the way of, if you can think about a situation where you saw something that made you feel uncomfortable, what gets in the way in your mind of making a decision to intervene or get involved? Here on Bainbridge, Robin.
Even though I normally get involved and speak up, there have been some times when I am so shocked and taken aback by some of them, I should say, subtle, not so overt racism, but something that's a little bit more subtle, takes a while to stick in. And it just, I'm so shocked, I'm kind of speechless, and I don't think to say anything or confront until after the fact. And then I go back and try to revisit. I then can cause a lot of trouble that way. But the initial, I think that Brenda Fauntleroy Johnson had a really good suggestion for what to do in those situations when you're speechless. And I think maybe it's the delay. I forgot what word she said, but it was just, let me think about this for a moment or something as a placeholder. But that's one of my, I'm not well enough prepared for those shocking, leave you speechless moments of what to do.
We had a situation at Rite Aid in which a Muslim woman was presented in line, and someone said, and I'm only calling out the culture because it's important for the story. And another individual asked her to go home to her country. And the line had 3 or 4 individuals in line at Rite Aid. Typically, when the situation have happened, there's a thing that happens to one's body called the bystander effect. And the bystander effect is when there's a large number of people, we are more likely or less likely to respond. Yeah, and we are less likely, as Reed and Megan, Kimmy, because we think that somebody else has probably more experience dealing with this. Maybe there's a counselor nearby. We have a lot of faith. We think there's a doctor, a pastor, a cop, maybe other people in our line, when we know how to dial 911, and we also know how to make that phone call or reach out. So that comes into play, and that psychological bystander effect is really profound in that make or break, that first minute when you make that decision. And so bystander training starts right here with us. It starts in your initial thinking of when those situations arise, I'll start flexing my muscles of how to respond. And in this case, even really gentle things that you do, like a look of dismay, which some of you are really good at it. I make students practice their look of dismay, which is that just indignant, like, oh, like earwax face of that's not going to fly here. Bainbridge Island is very good at this face. I haven't named it anything else but the earwax face, but when we see behavior that is unbecoming of what we believe a Bainbridge Islander would do, it comes out rather naturally. So we're trained pretty good at letting people know, hey, that's not okay here. And even that small thing may make the difference between someone believing they have this sort of freedom. And you've witnessed the alternate of this, and it is called a de-individuation. If you've ever went to a Black Friday sale and you notice that normal, well-behaved people suddenly have a propensity for antisocial, anti-normative behaviors. And that happens because they're in a large crowd and they figure that no one's going to recognize them or see them or call them out. And that also can be equally as destructive. We see this effect happening in both cases, especially on the internet now, where someone can make a anti-Black, anti-Jewish, anti-LGBTQ and remain fairly anonymous, and yet make this large sort of insult across the way. And so we see this anti-normal behavior in this large crowd where some of you have probably been trained that when you're in a large crowd, you behave better. And nowadays we're noticing that there are some ways that gives people freedom to act out because they know the bystander effect and they know no one's going to stop them. So be thinking of right now, if it would only take one person, it only took one person to document George Floyd, one phone, and it changed the world. That was one bystander. She didn't yell at anyone. She didn't stop the murder. She didn't do anything but document one of the Ds. So think about now, even though you may feel like, I don't know how much I could do based on health, based on physicality, know that all of you are important bystanders. Okay. As anybody, when I bring up that situation, all the cases I have are from Bainbridge. Does anyone have another one I have some with youth, but I'm trying to keep it with adults. Anyone have another situation that happened to you or something that you know about on Bainbridge? That's where I get many of my, I'll wait for a second. I know some of you have something. Okay, yeah, Anne, go.
This was told to me by one of the people who works at Walgreens drugstore on the island and who is or used to work there and is a Pacific Islander, and was screamed at by, she was getting out of her car to go to work and was screamed at by the person next to her to go home, same kind of thing in a way. And she got unnerved and got back in her car, and the person, a woman who was yelling at her, and the person's partner started rocking the car back and forth, right? Here on Bainbridge. And then the pharmacist and some other people came out and the aggressors went away. But she was telling me this story and I just said, this is just making me heartsick that this would happen here. And she just looked at me and said, it happens everywhere. And I'm curious, like, I don't know, I would like to think that if I came upon such a situation, I would say, what the heck is going on here or something, right? I believe that I would do that, but I don't know.
Kristen.
Rather than sharing a specific incident, I just want to say to Anne's comment that, and your question before about if there's a perceived power dynamic or if there's an innate power dynamic that's at play, like you are at work and you don't know if it's okay for you to do something that might be representing your organ, like that's come up at my place of work. People have asked if is it okay to, what's okay to do if you witness something? What kind of interruption is okay? So.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. So we have some notions of propriety that actually inhibit us from acting in a way, and I'm not asking all of you to act up, but I am asking you to act in the way that would be in a community way that would mitigate harm. And so just for the purposes of this presentation, I did call Bainbridge Island PD. I did check in, because as a woman of color, we do not call the police. Personal property issues, but if something happened, I would rely more on my community than call the police. And the Bainbridge Island PD, if you have a cat in a tree, if you have a problem with the blind, people call the Bainbridge Island PD for everything. So this is a new to me in a community that relies heavily on someone. On Bainbridge PD does mental health, medical health, and everything, right? So they really are that person. So if that victim does want you to call, then you would call. It's a lot different in Seattle. So just understand that the call into community right now, the call in for us all to have collective responsibility supersedes everything else. If you're on the ferry, your call into community supersedes. If you are at church, if you are in a parking lot, know that there's collective power in community that supersedes any organized power. And I'll tell you why that's really important to me later on, and why I talk about community every day. Robin.
About one of the six ways to respond. But one of them was, don't call the police if the victim, unless the victim wants you to. I'm thinking of the one exception where if somebody has been really severely beaten, it rises to the level of clear crime and needs to get documented, and the person might need to get arrested. And correct, I think that would be an exception to the rule.
Medical is always going to be. And I wanted to be really clear with you that if somebody else were teaching this class who didn't look like me, that they may say to call the police a lot earlier. It's through that lived experience and through the BIPOC lens that you're seeing this. So thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate that. All right, let's keep going. Sorry, I got to go back through there. My little slides. I was really organized this morning, you guys, with my green tea and my rainy day. Just wanted you to know that. I talked a little bit about the bystander effect, so I'm going to skip this real quick and go to the first D. Okay, the first D, we found out that this particular generation, meaning our elder population, is the best at this. The first D is distract. And we're talking about indirect and de-escalate. This is where someone would come up to a situation going on. Let's use the example in Rite Aid. And they would bring over to the woman being oppressed, and they would say, hey, I'm looking for dish soap. Do you know where dish soap is? You are going to distract what's going on, but pay attention to who? The victim or the perpetrator? Who should we pay attention to? And
Victim.
Always. And I know Bainbridge, just so you know, for our culture speaking, we are pretty good about being direct. That's not to the last D. You don't get to go there yet. So the first one, you want to be as stealth as possible and be indirect. You go straight to the victim. You make up anything. I have a message on my phone that looks like a map. In the middle of the map, it says, do you need help? So I can go up and ask for directions from someone being hurt or a young person so I don't embarrass them. And do you need help? Say this word, and the word is like one of the streets, right? And if they say that street, I stay with them because I know they need help. The aim here is to derail the incident by interrupting it. You can interrupt it with noise. You can interrupt it. My favorite, I watched on Bainbridge during the, there was somebody having a kerfuffle in the middle of TNC, and one of our elders who's super smart has a walker, and she took her walker right in between the two people that were talking. She had just had enough. I think she was hungry and wanted to leave too, but she took her walker in between the two individuals that were talking, and it broke it up because she needed to go. And you're not talking directly to the person harassing. Instead, you're talking about something completely related. Do you have direction? Do you need soap? Now, I will say to you this, when you're paying attention to the victim, you may offer a distraction and they may get very emotional because while you're near them, they may feel safe. If that happens to you, stay with the victim. Delay until you're going to make the next decision about what to do, because now you have a victim who's letting you know they may need some more help. Okay, give me some other ways you could distract. You could distract in a situation that you started to see getting heated. And do you think you could have distracted in that situation with the car?
Maybe. I mean, here's these people rocking a car, and I could say, yeah, hey, want to rock my car instead? No, I'm kidding. My car's a smart car. They could pick it up and carry it off. That was a joke. I think like I said, hopefully I would say something like, whoa, what's going on? Because I wouldn't be able to talk to the person in the car because the windows were shut, right? It would be harder. I mean, but I can think of another situation I've came across with transgender person who is being harassed. Like, just because you have a dress on doesn't mean you're a woman. To be able to walk up and pretty much like what you said, say, just start talking in a quiet voice to the person who is being harassed. Just saying, well, I like your dress. Can I stick around with you, or do you want to walk over there? Like, that is a simple way to make it work. And you're right that most of the time what happens, as far as I can tell, is that the person who's harassing gets frustrated and leaves. They might still be yelling, but they don't usually, well, I don't know, usually. In my experience, the few times this has actually happened, it's been pretty effective.
Okay, I'm going to pick on some people if it's okay with you. Kimmy, you obviously see that it's a racial event and you have knowledge and you want to speak to your racial knowledge in regard to correcting this person. But why might it not be a good idea to go on a MLK diatribe teaching lesson in that moment?
Because that person isn't open to hearing what I would have to say. And also, if it is a moment like that, I'll be very angry. And there's no way I could civilly, that's why I always try to reflect on things. But I also think this is telling me, and I know this, is that I need to prepare ahead of time so that when it's just like being prepared for a medical emergency. You know that if this is happening, it will look familiar to you because you've intellectualized it. And then I will have practiced in my mind anyway, a positive way. It's not a positive way, but it will interrupt the situation. So I will feel better about stopping something that I may not have said anything about because I'm overthinking it. So I want to stop overthinking these things so it comes natural. And I know that I'm offering advice and breaking things in a good place, from a good place.
You brought up something that's really important, is you get emotional. We don't like to see people of our own species hurting others. It's quite unnatural, and it causes friction, and it causes harm, and it causes trauma too. And none of us go out, except for when we're watching crime TV shows, do we go out and pick to watch trauma. And so know that isn't normal, and it absolutely goes against. So practicing in your mind how to pay attention to the victim and not to elevate a situation that may be elevated because of drugs, domestic violence, or on our island, typically bad mood. Maybe somebody's sugar is low. Maybe there's been an altercation, or in a case that I witnessed, it was a history of something that happened between two people in the parking lot. And so you're not going to solve or be therapy that day. You're going to distract and get them out of the way. Can you see my screen right now? Okay, good deal. Now I do not expect any of you to do this because this is more violent. And by the way, I'm picking the examples I'm using from here to be more applicable, know that there's many examples to use from these, and we'll talk about that.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Now watch what the man does. He doesn't talk. He doesn't do anything. What is he doing?
Don't follow me. Do not follow me. No, please.
Standing in between them. Doing what, Reed?
He's using his walker. He's using his walker. Yeah, it made me think about in the rocking car situation. You could just walk up and start
Got you on
to
camera. Don't follow.
do something totally unrelated.
When we stop again, get off. Do not follow me. Please get off.
So in the situation, the young woman was being followed by a man. None of the bystanders could stop that from happening. She felt she had to protect her body space because she was touched. The interesting is a walker went through and a man with potato chips just started eating potato chips in front of the perpetrator, just eating potato chips. Another woman was then able to delegate and get help and move the woman away to get somebody else involved. Sometimes when you're out with your girlfriends, out with your family, out with your grandkids, oftentimes those situations happen in the normal situations. Doesn't require you to get yourself in a situation where you're unsafe. The first and foremost is keeping yourself safe and breathe. The potato chips and walker was brilliant. It could have been a potentially really violent situation had that man said, got into a verbal confrontation about why he was doing a behavior. Now, think back on Bainbridge when we have people that park wrong or in a situation. Oftentimes we get into verbal application because we don't know why. We want to fix it. We want to give them some morality, help lead them down a path to facilitate change. We are not looking for transformational change. We're just looking to distract, to take care of who? Who are we taking care of?
The victim.
First and foremost is taking care of the person who is being harmed. Just think about that. Imagine if every action we did on our island, what it is, if we make sure we took care of the person that was harmed, first and foremost, before any other discussion, before any other other ways for us to distract. I don't want to miss a one because you guys might have better ones. You can ask for directions. Another way to distract is if you were at BPA or BEMA and there's another room or whatever, or you're saying something's outside, to show them something outside the building, getting them away from the situation where they have a chance for you to make a decision about whether or not that person is safe in the building. Because it could very well be that now your next steps after checking in with the victim is to escort them out of the situation because they've had a very emotional experience when they just went to buy something at the store. Now you need to get them safely to their car, or maybe they need to compose themselves because this has been a stressful situation. Sometimes it doesn't require you talking. You just check in and say, can I walk you to your car? Do you need a tissue or water? And having someone stand beside them can be extremely comforting. In a situation with the woman at Rite Aid, someone did that. She began to cry. People cry because they oftentimes feel safe. Right? Young people are notorious. No, I don't want any help. You can be here, and then give them a few minutes of just standing with them until the situation subsides, and they'll turn around and say, yeah, I go ahead and walk me to my car, or I'll take that chance. But and sometimes they will tell you to go away. They're embarrassed. They feel ashamed the situation happened to them. Even if it's outright racism, they will feel like it's their shame. And those situations are a little harder to deal with because they're embarrassed. That's a whole nother topic. What are some other ways we could delay? And this is more of a take care of the victim. Is there other ways you can think of to take care of the victim? And
Just, yeah, can
go ahead.
I just want to ask a question. What do you do when there's a mass of people? There's more than one person as the perpetrator, there's a group. What do you do then?
Are you asking if there's more than one perpetrator?
Yes.
Great question, Sheila. In the situation where you're checking in the victim, you are definitely going to be escorting them to a safe place. If that safe place is if you're in a Rite Aid, you're going to go straight to the store counter, straight to the person that works there. You don't want, for your safety, if it's a large group, if for your safety, you are not going to want to be alone and get yourself into a smaller position, especially if they're going. If you send them to a store clerk, they're going to get the police involved. And in that case, I would say that's rightly so, because now we're looking at positionality and we're looking at power, right? And a large group is going to have power. In many of the examples on our island and in Seattle that I've seen, perpetrators are usually one, and the victim is usually one, or one with a child. So we typically don't have large gangs running about Bainbridge, except for those walkers that are crazy and want you to get out of the way. We don't typically have those, but that is a great question to ask. Thank you. If you were on a bus and you saw a gaggle of individuals that were doing that, typically the perpetrator is going to be one, and the victim is going to be one. So, and that's a misnomer. We see a large group. It happens to African-American men all the time. We see a bunch of people cutting up in the back of a bus. We assume they're all perpetrators, when in fact, that's not the case at all. So being aware of your surroundings and paying attention to the victim will help you to navigate those type of systems. But again, safety first, always. Any other ways to delay? This is really goofy, and only if you have no ego whatsoever, like me at times. I was on a bus in which a woman was being called some nasty names. And I was on there with a field trip with students on the front of the bus. I got in between where my students were and the situation was going, and I started dancing obnoxiously. Now, I don't have an ego. I don't recommend anybody do that ever. But what it did was it started cracking up my students, and it cracked up the situation. And we were able to move the woman who was being harassed to the front of the bus near my students. Now, it wasn't a heroic act on my part. Do not shake your booty in front of strangers if you don't feel comfortable. However, in that moment, I knew there was something that had to be done. And if I verbally went after the guy, he'd probably go after me. And I was being an example for my students. Now, they've seen me goofy dance before, so that wasn't going to be a high risk for me. That was low risk. So my low risk booty dance allowed me enough time to delay and move the young lady to the front of the bus where we could get more help. Okay, so it was distract, delay, and this is going to be your best friend. Delegate is the third D. You saw the African-American woman at the end explain what was going to happen next. And believe it or not, she was delegating responsibility for others to document, for others to contact the bus or the transit employee of the situation that was going on. This can be really powerful for bystander. They may just ask you to write down the date and time of when something happened, or tell someone that you know about it, that it's documented, that there's a trail of paper, or you witnessed something and walked out of the store, but you witnessed it. Don't leave until you've told someone that you witnessed something that has occurred, the time, location, and get their name. Why that's important is because if this is something that's been going on, I would like to know about it in our community, right? It also helps us to the power of community. When we're in these situations of these protests or whatever, is to use all of our methods, to use the distraction, but also to know that we're supposed to be relying on community. I don't think we're going to get out of the pandemic. I don't think we're going to get out of a lot of issues unless we start working in community. And that means that you're not alone. And you may feel alone in the moment that you make contact with that victim, but when you turn around, you get this flood of empowerment that allows you to say, hey, can you document this? Can you tell the store person this? Can you tell the Safeway grocery guy I saw this? Speak to anyone around to notice what's happening, even if you're doing it quietly in the grocery department when you're seeing something across, even that may alter or mitigate harm for an individual that's being oppressed, okay? And it may sound like it's not a big deal, but it could make the difference between a situation that arises in a fatal situation or one that's just continued oppression. Yeah, Kristen.
I just wanted to mirror back that you did that at the beginning of this talk, and that it wasn't a delegation, using those moments where you can delegate in a low conflict situation or positive situation, you're building the community that you'll rely on when you need to delegate later on. So I just thank you for that.
I delegate a lot because you're all smarter than me, and because I'm not going to let that experience and that lived experience go unused. And I think that's, I was talking to Reed at the beginning of this, some of you have so much experience, legal, you have administrative experience, you have even experience where you've had to triage or had to deal with emergencies. Know that you're tapping into that lived experience that I don't have, especially dealing here with a Bainbridge culture where we do like to correct and help others understand truths. And we also usually know the person that we're delegating to. We're like, I'm telling Martha at Safeway, and then I'm going to tell Reed at the senior center, I'm going to tell on you. We're pretty good about that as a small island. And some of you might be laughing a little bit, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because we move at the pace of relationship here. So, and I delegate things so I don't miss things. I love that there are other people that can have eyes and ears for that. And that's the same goes with my students. If I go out in a group of students, I delegate eyes and ears so that our reach and the safety is better. Okay. Okay, so we have distract, delay, and delegate. If those land okay, give me a thumbs up right now. If any of those sound like you couldn't do them, give me a thumbs down. Okay. I'm going to ask right now, pick on everybody. What's your favorite, Marcy? Distract, delay, or delegate? I'll read your lips because I can't hear you. All of them. She loves all of them. Nancy.
Okay, I'm a fan of distract.
My favorite. Awesome. Debbie Hayes, what's your favorite? Distract, delay, or delegate?
Delay.
Awesome. Barbara, what are we doing? Are we distracting, delaying, or delegating?
I assume you're talking to me, Barbara Golden, right?
Yeah, there's two Barbara, so I'll do Barbara Achota first and then Barbara Golden second. So Barbara Achota.
Probably delay, but hoping to get to delegate because I know when I'm in a panic situation, I don't take in all the information. So I'm hoping somebody else will be there to maybe see the things I didn't see or hear.
Great.
Just get a fuller picture.
I love that example. Thank you for sharing that. Barbara Golden.
Okay, one thing that did not come up is something, it's more on the low distraction level. What I've done here on Bainbridge Island, when I've seen people of color, usually what's happening to them is that the other people, white people here, or non-people of color, are staring at them. And I know that that can be very uncomfortable. So usually I will go up and start talking to the person or let them know that you're not the only person of color on this island. You're not the only African-American on this island. And you are letting them know in a subtle way that I'm here and I welcome them. I'm glad to see them.
Huge, huge. Thank you, Barbara, for bringing that and your wisdom, sharing that, because it can be everything to have someone validate your everything. And that means a lot to them. Many times when distraction, people step in front of the person to allow them to be seen and to see. So the perpetrator isn't even in their visual. Christina, distract, delay, or delegate?
Well, I'm naturally an introvert, so the distraction thing I would be more self-conscious to do. But I have delayed, right? I just nothing that has been a major incident, but just enough to say, I'm here, and how are you doing? And, oh, there you are. Nice to see you. You know, that type of thing, and keep going. So I'm a big fan of the delay. If somebody else can delegate, that's absolutely awesome, because I don't want to leave the person. That's where I am.
On the spot. Thank you for picking one. Kristen, all of them are good for you, but which one would you jump in and do immediately?
Well, I want to advocate for people choosing the one that's the hardest and working on that. That is, so for me, yeah, I think distraction is the hardest for me because I tend to get really focused. I think a little bit like what Christina was saying, I get very focused on the issue and the person, and I don't see the bigger picture. I see the very singular thing that's happening. So distraction, yeah.
Kristen, thank you for bringing that up. Thank you. Katie, I think I know what yours is, but I'm not going to speak for you. What would you do? What's your go-to right now?
Well, it is usually a it's kind of a delay and distraction. You know, it's kind of like I'll try to do something that interrupts the energy, you know, but it's not. And then what it'll be is coming towards the victim and you know, checking in with them or offering something. I guess distraction, though, is my way of doing
it. All of you, and I really appreciate, Barbara Golden, thank you for bringing me up the place and the narrative for BIPOC especially, because you got to know that community has so much power. There's so much power in collective community that we are not silos. We are not individuals. We are so the power of we. I can't tell you how powerful that is for in my own individual life, but in being a part of this community where my children are, that they would have a community of people that would upstand for them and stand up for them. Cool. You guys are really like varsity level here. So just a real situation about document or filming. All of you use these fancy devices, these iPhones and smartphones. Real quickly, this is for your safety. This is one of your most powerful tools. As we know in George Floyd, that young lady may have absolutely started a revolution with her document, but you need to assess the situation for your safety. Some of you are really cool. You have your phones stealthily put here. Some of you, they're in your hand on your walks. They're in your hand. They are in your hand always. For some of you, probably too much, but you can have the power to document. But when documenting, and then asking the victim if they want the document, do not upload anything without the permission of your victim. You may, in fact, re-traumatize or put a situation into legality. Like we've had a situation where something was uploaded on one of our immigrant people, and it caused them more legal problems because it was uploaded without their permission, even though it was meant to help them in a situation. So do document, do tape. After George Floyd, we're telling everyone, yes, absolutely, if you are safe. Do not use this as a weapon of mass confrontation. And you've seen those Karen videos where someone comes up and they're like, I'm filming you and we're going to have a fight on camera. That isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about really stealthily documenting the situation from the side. And there are legal matters I know Robin could probably tell you more about in the BIPD, but from the community standpoint, you can document a situation going on in your phone. What happens after that is another matter. So do ask the person that you are observing whether or not they want you, or they may want a copy of it, give it to the victim. And do not upload it for your own personal YouTube or your TikTok. I know some of you are TikTok crazy. Do not upload it on your TikTok, okay? Or give it to CNN or a news thing unless you have express permission. Like I had already said, ask the person who was harassed, never posted online. Being harassed or violated is disempowering. It makes people feel helpless. Using an image or footage of a person, especially a child, without person's consent can make them feel powerless and can be more abusive. If the documentation goes viral, it can lead to further victimization and or level of visibility that the person may not want. Okay. In the case of George Floyd, it wasn't able to stop the killing. It was able to start a discussion and a very powerful example for information that needed to be exposed. And there are some other things about that, but that might be a whole separate class. It is for young people nowadays. Footage without a victim's consent makes their experience public. And we want to be careful not to engage in the legal system for them unless they want to be. It's traumatic. And we don't want to perpetuate just traumatic experiences, especially about BIPOC. Some of you know that you can doom scroll and see stories affecting violence in the Asian community, Muslim community, and Black community. We don't want to perpetuate always traumatic stories of BIPOC. It can be a real problem. It perpetuates an ideal that they're always victims. In the last, as we're doing an acknowledgement of what's going on with Trans Day, and I encourage you to go over to BEMA to find out about their exhibit because it's going to be awesome. They showed a slide of victims of violence, and the highest number of violent victims, of course, I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was Black and brown trans individuals. And I think it just stopped me for a minute. I mean, I cerebrally know that, but seeing all the Latina and Black individuals affected occurred to me that sometimes when we think that always happens, we think that always is supposed to happen. And the truth is, those could have been mitigated by a bystander. Many of those situations could have been mitigated if somebody was stepped in, because we normalize trauma being affecting certain groups. And so if you see an altercation happening with a person that we don't step in, oh, that's, you know, I had someone say, oh, Black girls are just loud and crazy, when in fact a person was being hurt. But because of the narrative they had about those individuals, they didn't want to step in. So we were careful about the narratives that we perpetuate, that we discuss, and that we pass on. Anyone want to add anything to that? I know that's a little heavier in this particular presentation, but there's more to that. Due to time, I'm not going to show a couple of these videos. I'm going to move on just a little bit because you guys are doing so well. When do you call the police? Amy Aspel, when do you call the police?
Okay, if he asks you to. Yeah.
I think it would be as soon as you observe something dangerous happening, and you'd have to have your phone out, I guess. So,
Amy, you said something really magical just now. I'm probably not going to call the police, but if the victim asks me to call the police, I'm going to call the police. If they are a BIPOC individual, you are not going to leave them when they call the police. If you have to call the police, you will stay with them. And I'm just going to tell you, that's just from my own lived experience. If you have someone who is BIPOC and you have called the police, you will stay with them. If it's a medical emergency, until medical emergency, package them and put them into a box and drive them away. Do not leave a Black and brown individual in the hands or care of the police. I'll just put that as a hard stop. Get to know them, talk about anything, use distraction, pull out the cookies or the granola bar you have in your bag and hang out. And last, some of you are so excited because this is what Bainbridge is really, really good at. But this is the last D, the one that we don't want you to use unless you absolutely have to, the last one, to directly respond to the perpetrator, okay? What mental shifts occur to become an active bystander, meaning you're going to respond to that person. You are now going to engage with them. You may want to directly respond to harassment. And I'm not going to give an example, but when might you want to do that? Was that a hand, Anne? Go for it.
It certainly could be. For me, I think I know that I respond when I see that no one else is going to. I'm not usually the first one. I mean, this goes back to my college days of standing in lines of protesting and all that sort of thing with National Guard or police or whatever it is. My tendency is to say, you know, as you sort of pointed out, surely someone else is better at this than me. But if they're not, then I do.
Katie.
I'll directly respond if I know the perpetrator.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Good, Robin and Katie. I respond almost every time. If it's a child or a youth person, I probably jump out of my way. I go crazy. So if I see there's anybody that's vulnerable, I will probably, it's not even, I try not to, and I can't help myself to jump into those situations. Has anyone ever been downtown or at Safeway or Market where somebody needed some type of improvement in which you decided to help them out? Maybe they need to be reminded of behavior. Now, listen, I know some of you on this call, so I know some of you have given some generous, helpful suggestions to others. When have you done that?
I have done that with not very successful results. But for my own, actually, I waited to respond to the person as whom I knew after the fact. This is a white male who I thought had been, it pained my heart what he was saying to my Black female friend. Unwittingly, I just thought he would understand and know better, and I thought I was doing him a favor to offer to talk later and bring this to his attention. But my friend said, "Oh no, you're never going to hear from him again." So well, you know, but I still kind of naively thought I could try. But oh well. But I was definitely could not resist the urge to correct or enlighten or whatever it was. I couldn't let it go without commenting. Not in front of my friends, but later, yeah.
Those of you who are teachers or who led groups or facilitated groups or been dance teachers or art teachers and professionals, it is very hard to actually not directly respond to a perpetrator, especially in your small group. But safety goes first. And there are ways to directly respond, like, I don't think so, or something that's not as going down that therapy track. But I just want you to say that part of our culture here on Bainbridge Island is being highly intelligent, white, affluent, and we're helpful with our suggestions. This can be a good culture for bystander, but it can also present a very problem in the way that responding to, are we taking care of the victims? Is the focus on the victims and not the focus on our ego or the fact that we know Joe or Amy or whatever who's having a particularly bad day. And I don't profess to go rob dignity from perpetrators, because if you're a perpetrator, I'm probably not going to care too much about your dignity, but being on a small island, we can collectively raise and elevate the social consciousness and hold a standard that is higher than the one being presented by merely saying that is not a behavior that we're going to, and calling out racism if it's racism, calling it out. We are not racist on Bainbridge Island. We are not going to be homophobic, and really being specific of speaking truth to power, rather than saying this is not, I don't like this behavior, saying the words, we are not racist. We are not homophobic. In our community, we are not. Why do you think it's important to be specific? Why don't I just say, everybody be good. We all be good. Oh, be good, y'all. Just be good. Just be good. Why do I have to say the word?
You need to name the behavior.
I want to collectively call into my community that we have the collective power to say no. We say no to racism. We say no to homophobia. We say no to the behaviors that would oppress. We say no to hurting a woman. So being able to say that also empowers you, and it taps you into understanding your why. It taps you into your shared values of why you're taking this class today. And I guess if I want to encourage you to do anything is stay safe and tapped in, is that you start practicing these maneuvers in your head. Oftentimes on our island, truthfully, you're not going to go and find people fighting on our buses at all. You're not going to find them arguing in Calico. You're going to find some interactions that you might be surprised by that are microaggressions. But I want you to be as aggressive about stepping into those situations, even more than the ones that come and shock you into acting, right? That shock you into acting. Safety first. To be truthful, we're good at directly responding to people that look like us. I'm going to say that again. We're really good at responding directly to people that look like us. Would you do that in a situation where you saw an African-American woman doing something, or Hispanic male doing something, or someone who's speaking a different language? Begin thinking of what that feels like and what that looks like, because here I am as your African-American instructor today telling you, hey, I wouldn't necessarily call the police, and I like Chief Joe. He's a nice person. And yet, because of the lived experience of what I've seen, I wouldn't do that. So if you had a situation where I was a victim, I would say, please don't call the police. I don't want to be embarrassed anymore. Can you help me to my car? Help me and my kids get to my car where I'm safe. I just want to get out of the situation. I got to make dinner. Begin thinking about how you collectively and delegate to your friends. Kimmy and Debbie are walking down. Oh, Debbie, you got that. I'm going to wait with her. We grab water. We're going to go ahead and walk her to her car, or bring the car up, or we can take her somewhere else. In a day and age where people don't like to use the words, and we have trans students on our island who have been affected by oppressive language, oppressive questions, make sure you're safe. You can ask the person who's being harassed if they want someone to speak up for them. That is nice to do, to check in with your victim. Try not to go and jump in front of them and start a fight. But things you can say to practice: that's inappropriate and disrespectful, not okay. You can say loudly, leave them alone. That's homophobic. That is racist. Leave them alone is really powerful. It's low risk for you. You're not saying, I'm right, I'm going to teach you something. You're saying, leave them alone. That's inappropriate. That's disrespectful. That's not okay. Ooh, only a little bit over, doing well. The 5 Ds are distract, delegate, document, delay, and the last, and not often used, totally, even though I think I use it a lot, is directly respond. I'm going to show you a short clip. I have a whole clip about youth, but because of our group, I'm going to skip that. But just know that pay attention in the groups that you're around, in TNC and stores and things that you're around this week as you travel to Bremerton or you travel to Seattle. Just be aware of things that you're identifying and seeing, because just that begins a whole process of ways. But I'm going to show you a really quiet way and see if you can identify the 5 Ds being presented. This is from the Washington Coalition of Asian Affairs, and I love this so much because it shows the power of, some of you may think you're older, you may not think that you have a duty or a ability because of physical strength, but I want you to see who's the most powerful in this bus ride.
This is not okay. No, no, stop, no. No, stop, no.
All right, now I know that was really silly, but I wanted you to who was the most powerful of all the people distracting? And I don't mean muscles. I mean, like, who was the most powerful? Nancy, who was the most powerful, you think?
Grandma with a gong. She was quick. She just whipped in there, the Zoom, and the guy backed off.
We don't have a tendency to move people out of the way that are elders. And hopefully our culture, my African-American culture is when African-American granny gets on the bus, we all stand up. And so different cultures, but I want you to notice in her small stature, she was able to make a huge difference. She looked, she made eye contact, she made a noise, she didn't do anything else. So if you take anything away from today, I want you to know that one of the 5 Ds is you. One of the 5 Ds is me. And together we can be the 5 Ds. You don't have to be every single one of them, but you have to be one of them. And I'm not letting any one of you off the hook. If you see me with my 3 boys, you be a D in any way. And if you have to discipline, just add that D right in because my kids are wild. But know that we need you. And when I say we need you, this isn't a collective like blase, like put it on a flyer. This is like the expectation from this training here. You can have all the resources, but you're on the hook now. I've licked your head. You're on the hook for a D. And provocative yelling matches of social justice have their place. But right now, if we have a community of caring people that collectively work together, it's way more powerful. I don't think there's one good leader right now during this pandemic. I think there's going to be leaders who want to call people in the community. That's what's going to make our next group of leaders, because we don't need one individual doing something right. We need everybody doing a little bit.